So what would happen if the possible dream occurs and Jeremiah Love is still sitting there at number 8 when the Saints draft? What would happen if reality sets in and more than likely Carnell Tate is going to be the guy at number 8? Well, in today's Saints film room, we're going to mock draft the dream versus the reality. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So starting with I'm calling it the impossible dream because, in my opinion, there's really nobody close. I think there's a lot of good football players after Jeremiah Love, but I don't think there's anybody close to the title of best player in this draft. And it boggles my mind the way people try to do these weird brain gymnastics trying to talk themselves out of why you shouldn't take the best player in the draft in the first round when if he's sitting there when you pick. So I'm going to address that briefly. Going, you do. How often do you get a chance to get the best player in the draft? And clearly, this young man is talented on a very high level. You get the will need versus this, but the you don't need that player, so why would you draft him? Because he's the best available. I get this weird argument, or see it, I should say, where well, do you know the list of running backs in the top 10 that actually led their team to championship is small? And I'm always thinking, I bet you it's bigger than the list of quarterbacks taken in the top 10 that didn't win their team a championship. It's all relative. Feel like you take the best player, and if it fits a need, fantastic. If it doesn't fit a need, you figure it out later. I think a lot of the times the problem comes in when teams do that. They do a bad job of figuring out later. And that would be the one and only drawback that I have with the Saints taking him if, again, the impossible dream happens at 8, is can we figure it out later? Because you are skipping on a need, and kind of got proven out as I filled out this mock draft that, yeah, some of the needs you're looking at, it becomes very difficult to do something about it. And we will talk about that. So after taking Love, 8 overall, 42 rolls around, Chris Bell is sitting there. And at this point, I'm going need to address a need because we took Love. And receiver and cornerback in my mind are like two of the biggest. Still want an edge player, but that's a whole different conversation that we'll address in the fourth round. But looking at receivers, it's if you the top three kind of sitting there. Bell was kind of by himself, a little further down. Jeremy Bernard from Alabama, and then Skylar Bell from UConn, more very bottom of the second round. I like Bell, and I think he could do a lot of good things on the Saints. Bernard, I'm not a huge fan of, but there are a lot of people that are, and the Saints might be one of them. I get I don't know, to me, just a little Debo Samuel impression, but I'm not sure. Because if I knew confidently he's anywhere near Debo, then I'm going to like him a lot better at 2. But the biggest thing for Bell, and the caveat is if the medicals check out, and seems like everybody thinks they will be, and he's going to be fine. That's not an issue, but really need to make sure of that over the next couple of weeks. But if everything checks out, big, strong, fast, catches the ball, contested catch, just checks a lot of boxes for the Saints. And on top of everything else, he has history and 1 year of chemistry with our starting quarterback. And what we're talking about here is building around Shuck, and that's going to help build around Shuck an awful lot. Bell, if he mentioned this when we did the film review on him, if he doesn't have that knee injury, there was a lot of people thinking he could be the third or fourth, depending on how it shook out. Wide receiver taken off the board and likely somewhere in the first round. So if you can get kind of, we did this with Kool-Aid McKinstry, and really looks like Tyler Shuck so far, a first round value in the second round, man, that's a slice of fried gold. It's really solid. So I would have to go Bell here. There's some cornerbacks there, and we're going to talk more about them when we do the Tate mock draft. So there's 3 cornerbacks sitting there that I think would have been worth it, possibly. And if Bell isn't there, that might have been my pick. Also, fair to mention that Peter Woods and Christian Miller were both there in the defensive interior. I think one might be. Don't think both of them will be, especially Miller. I think he's the better of the two, but everybody seems to like Woods more. And the intriguing name that is always showing up there whenever I do a mock, even though I don't know if it's a need, is Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker from Texas. I could see where he would enter a conversation because that is a really, really good football player. And another one where I'm going, he might be a first round guy that's sitting there in the second round. So I don't think the Saints can quite afford to go there on him, but fair mention that he's there. Third round, um, cornerback thins out an awful lot. It's basically down between two players for me right here. Keelan Rutledge, who I drafted, and Romello Height, the defensive edge player that played opposite of David Bailey at Texas Tech. I think Rutledge is your um, better need fit for the Saints in this aspect. I think both of them are going to take a little bit of development, and they do have some question marks. There's no doubt about it. But you're talking about the third round here. I think they're both in the ability to show up and help you as rookies. A lot of teams feel that. I think the biggest question on height is he's like Bailey, 240. Smaller guy. He's not going to play the inside. You're looking as an outside pass rusher, mostly situational guy. And just quite frankly, he doesn't have that rush ability, that pass rush ability. He's still solid. He's still solid in the run game, and he's a good football player. So I don't want you taking this the wrong way. But I'm looking at Rutledge going, he's just a run blocking machine. And probably going to have to work on his pass protection a little bit, but it's everybody seems to think he'll be fine there. Just may take him a little bit to develop. So you're talking about two kind of developmental players, but the odds are they're going to be able to help you. I think Rutledge just fills the bigger need out of the two. And also, to be honest with you, if I don't get David Bailey, as we covered in the previous video, the next edge rusher I'm really looking at, because I think it's either Bailey or him, 1, 2, which way you want to rank uh, rank them as pure pass rushers. But it's Nadame Tucker from Western Michigan. He played at quote unquote smaller schools, and there's some questions there. Will it translate? But man, you just pop film on this guy, and it's like, holy hell, he can come from that outside and just cause chaos. 14 and a half sacks last year. So a lot of ability there, and I think an absolute steal in the fourth round. You're talking day 3. That shows up, even if he is only ever going to be that situational pass rusher. As number 132 overall, sign me up for that. The last one is needing to address cornerbacks. I was hoping when I took Tucker, Kilgore, the corner slash safety, depending on where you look at him, from South Carolina. He's listed both ways at various sites, but that's what he is. He's an inside slot box safety, pretty much his whole college career. Pretty good at it. Rolled the dice, he would still be there. He was not. But this came up in the Bailey draft. I ended up taking Demmings. He's sitting there again. It's a guy, again, a smaller school, Stephen F. Austin, but played very, very well. And he is the one name on this prospect list that I haven't done a film review. So we're going to do that at the end of this because I've got a couple of guys from the next mock that also fall in that category. But he's gained a lot of steam. And when I pulled this film and started looking at him, it's like there seems to be a lot of ability there. It's just the age old question, a lot like Tucker playing at a smaller school. Is it going to translate to the NFL? When you're talking day 3 guys in the fourth round at 132, 136, I think you got a little leeway there to try it out. But I will say this, if this is the first corner we draft, there's no doubt after the draft is over, we will be entering free agency to bring in another veteran corner, rightfully so. And there's a list of them there to choose from, so I don't think that would really be a huge deal. But just pointing it out. So, dream the dream. Um, best player available best player in the draft. He's now sitting there, and you've got a dynamic duo and you can do a lot of different things with Love and Hn there. Bringing in Chris Bell, I think that really solidifies a 3 spot at the receiving core. As long as the medicals check out, have to mention that. Rutledge is a guy I do believe be a solid backup for you as a rookie, but I think he could seriously challenge Ruiz if his because he's going to show up and be the better run blocker the second he walks in the door. Gets his pass protection up where he needs it. You may have just got your young starting right guard in the third round. There's nothing wrong with that. And then Tucker and Demmings, spots that we need playmakers at, and they show on film that they are indeed playmakers. So roll out with this draft. I'm looking like this. I'd be very, very happy and saying, look, we really significantly made strides to improve this roster and get everything better. Still building around Tyler Shuck, which is pretty much the goal in 2026. So moving on from the impossible dream to the reality check, I guess you could say. And kind of as I just randomly run even just a first round mock on PFF, just kind of see where everything's falling. And I don't know the exact percentage because I haven't tracked it, but I know I see Tate kind of being our pick when that eighth spot comes up a lot more than a lot of the other guys on my particular Saints big board. So here we go. We're going to take Tate with the eighth overall. And look, I'm Impossible Dream versus Reality Check. Not in a bad way. You're still getting a hell of a good football player with Carnell Tate and fits a huge need on this Saints roster. And I think is going to fit right in. Oddly enough, PFF today did a little, and this is Wednesday or Thursday, I forget, but they had an article about one major of their top 10 players, and Tate's in their top 10. One major drawback, basically, is, and theirs for him was he's never been a number one receiver because being the wide receiver factory at Ohio State, just never really got the opportunity. Smith showed up in the last 2 years and was their one. He's the two. So they pointed out he's never had, the top cover corners in the Big Ten and in college football when he played other high level teams following him around because most of the time it was Smith that they were worried about. To me, that makes him the perfect fit for the Saints. Because I don't know if you can say that except for maybe the Giants because of Malik Neighbors, but any of the teams in front of us. But Olave and him, yeah, Olave's going to draw coverage more, and he's going to do what he did at Ohio State, which was a solid number two receiver. And most Ohio State receivers, because this is something that has happened since they started churning out these receivers, you get a couple guys coming out in the draft that kind of get that, well, we're not sure if he could be a number one because so-and-so was, I mean, think Olave and Wilson were there at the same time and drafted in the same year. It happens. A lot of them do emerge as a guy you can suddenly, year two, year three, it may be going, oh man, he can draw the most targets, catch the most balls, make the most plays. He is a number one. So I think Tate definitely has that in his ceiling, would make him a solid pick all the way around for the Saints. Did a video on him more in depth, obviously. So going to move on to, and Brandon Cisse is who I picked at second. Now keep in mind when for the love, previous mock, I talked about the usual suspect of cornerback. I see these three right around 42 almost every time I do a mock draft. Brandon Cisse from South Carolina and D'Angelo Pons, but kind of a lot of people have between him and Chris Johnson. And those are the three names. So I'm actually going to talk about Cisse and Johnson real briefly together because they both have good size, good speed, show explosion, and they both, to me, my opinion, I really haven't seen this anywhere, but watching them, I see a lot of Kool-Aid McKinstry coming out of Alabama. To me, very similar. Not quite the same player, but size, ability, what they do on film in college, and very, very similar. And I would be more than happy to wind up with another Kool-Aid McKinstry at this spot, filling that cornerback slot. Went with Cisse. He just kind of seems to be the better guy, but I think you're okay either way. D'Angelo Pons for Indiana was this past year, but in his college career, a playmaker, just a hell of a cornerback. The only thing that scares me about him, and if it was not for these two numbers, I actually think he would be in front of both these guys solidly. Um, but he's 5'9", 170 pounds. It's just a little small and light. There have been corners in the past that can overcome that, but it's sort of like the short arm argument. Just the numbers historically stack up against corners of that size coming into the NFL and making an impact. Second round pick, I don't know. Previous video where you're talking about Love and Bell, and we get into the third round, and he would, okay, then I'm willing to go, well, maybe we can gamble a little bit on that size, not being the factor in the NFL that historically it shows, and we're going to get that playmaker from Indiana. I just can't do it at 42. So kind of went with Cisse, but I could see Johnson. To me, they're closer together. But most rankings just kind of have ponds in between them. So went with Cisse. He's another one. Don't have film on. We're going to do it at the end of the video. But you watch him play. There's an awful lot there to like. Just mentioning Jacob Rodriguez still sitting around that 44, 45 area. And a name we didn't mention, R. Mason Thomas, who I wouldn't have taken. He wasn't there in the Love video when I took Bell, but even if he was, I'm still taking Bell. But he's an interesting name floating around, depending on how those edge rushers uh, shake out and when we decide we may want to jump in for one. But I'm not doing it because let's skip ahead in the fourth round again. Nadame Tucker sitting there. If I don't get Bailey, that's the guy I want to get, and if I can get him on day 3, I'm going to call it a huge win. Rutledge, kind of the no-brainer. The way the names were shaken out, it was a little different than I'm normally seeing. There was really nobody there that I would go, yeah, I'm taking him over Rutledge. Again, this goes back to the what we just talked about in the Love draft, mock draft. He's going to fill a need, and I think he's going to take a right guard job on the Saints if he shows up here via the draft. He's taking that job sooner than later, probably. I saw Tim Keenan. That's a name this one was just kind of weird. I don't know why taking Tate in the way it shook out, but he's normally in that range, but normally drafted because he's a guy I'd keep an eye on. Here's the deal with Keenan, and again, I have no film review on him. He's going to be the third one we're going to do as soon as we finish going through this. But like, he's not going to bring a pass rush. That's not his shtick. But he is a zero tech or an A gap, depending on what scheme and you're being flexible. But basically, he operates the middle defensive line. He is he's a juggernaut, man. He is really tough to deal with in there. So he is going to jam stuff up, cause disruption in the running game. He's going to beat up on some blockers trying to handle him. Seems to be bull rush is really his only go-to in pass rush. But if it translates to the NFL and he's able to do it, I think he's as a day 3 guy, and I think that's why he kind of gets this day 3 knock is they just don't think he's going to bring any or much of any pass rush to the NFL. And I like it. Bo Davis can just work with him and get him just a little bit. It's not a bad pick to be grabbed, and that's not a bad 2 additions to your defensive line, in my opinion. Keenan and Tucker on at the very beginning of day 3 feel a lot more comfortable about those. In both these guys, we're talking about the reserve positions backing up what we've already got there. I would feel really, really good about that. If this is the reality check, if this is our reality where you tell me we're going to come out and with still 2 5s and a 6 to work on day 3, and that's probably going to be a whole separate video I'm going to do with those picks. But you're talking about our top 5 picks. I'm getting Carnell Tate. I'm getting a third cornerback, young. Now we can really figure out how that cornerback situation is going to work and who's going to play inside and who's going to stay outside. You've got many options there, your top 3. Rutledge, looking to be the guy that's going to replace Ruiz and give us that. Edwards is the veteran. Hopefully we keep McCoy healthy. 3 other young spots. where we're really continuously building that offensive line for the future. And then two really solid defensive line types, one in the interior and one on the edge in Keenan and Tucker. Sign me up for that. I'm on board. I'm good. And then, like I said, the next three picks, let's get some value in those guys and see what we can do in 2026. The Charles Demmings, cornerback, Stephen F. Austin. First thing you're going to talk about is his size. 6 foot 1 inches tall, 190 pounds. He's 23 years old, just turned 23. In his career in college, he had 63 total tackles, 9 interceptions, 35 pass breakups. Good cover guy and a great athlete. Numbers from the combine. Let's just talk about his 40 and his 10-yard split. 4.41 seconds and then 1.55. Both tied for fifth in the cornerbacks in this draft. His explosiveness, normally measured, they'll talk about the vertical and the broad jump. Well, vertical jump 42 inches, broad jump of 11 feet. Both tied for second in this cornerback class. He has a very, very high athletic score. But when you look at his film, and it's kind of backed up by some PFF numbers there, he is a great cover guy, but he's got some really good ball skills, and he's developed that over the course of his college career, because you're kind of looking at the last 3 years, over 900, close to 1,000 snaps in those 3 years, and coverage snaps. His passer rating, he's held quarterbacks to 72.7, then 64, then 39.8. Touchdowns, he got better. Gave up 3 each of the first 2 years, but his final year in college only gave up 1. His interceptions went from 2 to 2 again in his third year. Final year, stepped that up to 4. So he is a playmaker. He's athletic. You see this clip right here. You see this a lot where he is locking up with corners with a quarterback expecting to have one-on-one and ends up having to sail a ball over their heads because he's got nowhere to go with the ball. Play tight coverage in red zone, which I really like to see. And that's one of his picks, was just basically getting physical with a receiver and getting him the hell out the way so he could grab the ball. So here's a guy that, man, checks a lot of boxes. The one he doesn't check is it's Stephen F. Austin. For better or worse, Southland Conference School, it's FCS. That kind of, I think, didn't get him a good look until he showed up, that All-Star week. Started working, and with pro scouts there, pro coaching staffs there, he popped some eyes. And then he went in the combine and not only with the testing numbers throwing up just an insane athletic score. In fact, his athletic score by the NFL figuring it was an 88, and that was number 1 of all cornerbacks that went to the combine. So I don't understand how he's still going to be a day 3 unless they're still just a little shaky about that's a smaller school. That didn't exactly come from the big time. But in the situation where he falls into a 4th round pick area, that day 3 area, if you're the Saints, man, you got to figure I'm on board with that. I bring that guy in. He's my third corner, and he really does give me a kind of Quincy Riley feeling of a very good football player on the corner. Now, Riley went to Louisville. It's a little bigger school and got him a little more, I guess, publicity. But I just get the feeling of you're going to draft a guy and there's going to be just a lot of teams really, really sorry that they passed on him. And the Saints won't be because brings a lot of skill to this team. And he would be basically your third corner. Kind of looking in that backup role, but depending on what happens in the star position and what they want to do on the inside, he could become a very valuable player for the Saints. Brandon Cisse, cornerback from South Carolina. He transferred there in 2025. 2023 and 2024, he was at North Carolina State. Freshman year, played primarily slot corner and some special teams. And as a sophomore and junior, he was basically an outside corner. Official numbers from the combine, he had a 41-inch vertical jump, a 10-foot 11-inch broad jump. So numbers you really want to see showing that explosiveness. and got a little hamstring tightness, and that kind of shut him down for the rest of the combine. Pro day ran a 40 yard dash 4.40 seconds. His 10-yard split was unofficial at 1.56, but sounds about right. So he's look, size and athletic ability, he's got both. Played North Carolina State, South Carolina, played against some stiff competition in both schools. In his career, 68 total tackles, only 2 interceptions, but it is what it is. 10 pass breakups. He held for his 3 years, he held the guys he was covering to a 52% completion rate. So barely half of the balls thrown in his direction got completed. He only gave up 3 touchdowns in his career, one in each season. Look, and his quarterback ratings against 23 was 77.3, and 24 was 84.6, 25, 76.9. So look, solid, consistent cover guy. Maybe you'd like to see more turnovers or pass breakups, but he's a defender that's on receivers constantly. So solid tackler, only a 9.3 missed tackle rate. And his film shows that he will come up and hit you. The one thing I noticed in his video in South Carolina, while listed as an outside corner, kind of kept seeing him to pop up on the inside. And you may catch some of that in these videos, and some of it was right before the snap, things changed, as happens in the modern offenses and defenses, where that corner was suddenly on the outside. Now he kind of finds himself in the box. But he seems like he can play there. But again, it's limited film, and if you go look at his PFF snap count, um, they barely give him any credit for snaps in the slot, 35 and then 32 in the box. So 67 total out of his over 400. Um, but I feel like you would have something there. But generally speaking, what I feel like you have is a very good outside corner, a little more battle tested than Demmings, although Demmings' film pops a lot more against, some would argue, lesser competition. So just bring that up as a comparison between a guy in Cisse, who solid second rounder, but there are rumors like Kansas City has that late first round pick and they're interested in grabbing him. We'll see how it plays out, but I think if he's there, he's probably your guy at 42 if you've already taken your wide receiver, in this case the Tate mock draft. And Tate and Cisse, I think you're getting very two solid players at largely your two biggest positions in need, just because both those rooms have, after the top two guys in each, a fair amount of uncertainty. So Tim Keenan is a 23-year-old, primarily nose tackle, zero tech guy in a 3-4, although he can play the A gaps too. It's a 5-year guy at Alabama because he is a redshirt senior, and definitely not the most athletic guy you're ever going to see in the middle. But what his film shows is plays with really good leverage, can really anchor down that defensive line, make it hard to push him around, can handle offensive linemen, and he shows some ability to kind of play two gap where he head up on a center or an offensive lineman and kind of able to handle the gaps on either side of him without too much problem. Felt like his film showed he played with a lot of strength in the run game. Now, in the pass rush game, as we mentioned, not much more than a bull rush. So if he was able to overpower offensive linemen, that's primarily where most of his pressures and sacks came from. And he'd have a couple of sacks each season that he played. But the red flag went up at the combine when he went to the bench press. He only did 21 reps at 225 pounds. Typically, you want linemen to hit at least 30 and plus on that. And 21 is a rather low number. So he's the case of, is it just his technique was that good and he's not really that strong? And if it is, can you get him strong enough? So looking around, and but prior to the combine, he was much more highly thought of until that 21 rep thing kind of bounced him a little bit down the rankings. But I still think when you watch him play, little film showing around going, man, that's what a zero tech guy especially in a 3-4 in the nose, has to do. So this may be a slight project that you're picking up in round 4, maybe even waiting to 5 or 6 with some of those picks for someone like him going, if it's just really a matter of a strength issue, can we get him strong enough to to use that technique that he's using, be a centerpiece basically for the run defense. That's primarily what you're looking for as a backup role, but a guy that's going to handle that center and handle those center guard gaps and just lock down the middle and literally anchor the defense. Last thing, his arm length is slightly below the 31 inch that they like to see arm length or higher. So the short arm syndrome thing comes in again. But I think it's a little less important for what he's doing in the middle as opposed to an edge rusher. But still worth noting that they like the 31 inch and longer for those defensive linemen. Thing is, once you get out of the second round, maybe you might have some guys drop to the third. But those interior, the top end of the defensive interior guys are really, really good. Some are specialists, more pass rushers than run stoppers and vice versa, and some balanced guys mixed in there. But I think when you're getting down at this point in the draft, I don't want to say beggars can't be choosers, but there's going to be some guys, and I think Keenan right now is a prime example. Some guys whose maybe film looks great, and you get a red flag like the 21 reps, or the opposite end of that, a guy who didn't really show up on film, but then in the pre-draft process, combine, pro days, working out with teams, they're going, well, he looks good here. We just can't figure why it didn't show up on tape. So, be perfectly honest, this may not be the perfect pick where I grabbed him, but I think he's the guy that's probably sitting right on the tail end of defensive interior guys before you move it into more of a project mode, looking at guys on the list after him. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I'm running some mock drafts, when he wasn't sitting where he was sitting, was for that very reason, going, might be some instincts to try to reach on a guy like that because we really need some help on the interior. The film's good, just versus the red flag that showed up at the combine. So there it is. 2 mock drafts, opposite end of the spectrums, the impossible dream and the reality. And again, you're getting a good football player at 8 either way. I don't expect, other than maybe through divine intervention, where the best player is going to fall all the way down to us at 8. But again, the running back uh, foibles that some teams have, or front office is going, you just don't draft running backs that high, may come into play. But even if it does, I'm thinking Dallas with number 12 and number 20 would be a team that would come vaulting past us, because I think they would be very interested in adding Jeremiyah Love. Outside of that, like I said, Tate, very good football player. To me, I, 8, 42, and 73, I feel like unless you just kind of totally get unlucky and blow it, you're getting some good football players that are going to help this team one way or the other. I think, and that's why I'm kind of focusing on that 4th round. 132 and 136 are the ones where you really um, you're really gonna have to work do some hard work, I think, to get some of these guys ready, because we're gonna need guys in that range, that 4th round range, to be able to make this roster and be able to play this year. I think the film is kind of showing there's talent out there, and there's guys that can help the team. Saints are and appear to be doing their due diligence to find them, get ready to draft them, bring them in, keep the rebuild, and quit calling this a rebuild. Going, okay, we've rebuilt. Now we're adding in to get to that next level where we want to be. So first time here, like what you saw, please like, share, subscribe, bang all kind of buttons that you can. Tell me down in the comments. Let me know. Getting a lot of good suggestions about players you could put in there, and why some of these guys may not be the right ones. I get it, and it's a very subjective thing, but I'm sticking by my guns. 8, 42, 73. That's our big 3. and we can really do some damage there. Before I go, I'm going to try this at the very end because I have done previous film rooms with a lot of the players that we talked about in this draft. So you'll see one perfect draft. That's Jeremiyah Love. Pass fail, you'll be able to see Tate, who's on the thumbnail, but also Rutledge film reviews in there. Day 3 steals, the big guy in the yellow jersey wearing number 11, that's Nadame Tucker, and believe me, he's a he's a he's a beast. I really really like that guy. I would like to see the Saints get a hold of him. And then the Tyler Shuck Chris Bell video. So if you want to go back and look at it into the film and the ones I was telling you, hey, we have film on them. That's the videos where to find them. And as I'm signing off, they'll start popping up all around my face, or maybe even hiding it if you're lucky. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.